The Wagga Women's Health Centre was established in the late 70s, 40 years ago, by men and women in the community who could see a need for services. The Wagga Women's Health Centre is part of the statewide non-government women's health sector. We provide services that encompass trauma counselling, crisis and support work, health education, economic wellbeing. We have visiting practitioners that provide massage. Other services in town provide sessions from our centre as well. We have a library and women can come and sit and be safe in our environment.
Domestic violence is one person's deliberate choice to use power and control in an effort to dominate and cause harm to another person.
Domestic violence is the use of power and control tactics, strategies, behaviours over someone, generally speaking, or according to the statistics, generally it's men's use of violence over women.
Domestic violence is the abusive behaviour that is shown within a relationship, usually an intimate relationship, to have power over another person.
Domestic violence refers to the abuse, the violence and the intimidation that one person can experience as a result of a relationship from another. It can occur when we are in intimate person relationships or shortly after or whilst we have left the relationship, and it can also occur between family members, friends and other people who are seen to us as being close and connected. So domestic violence can take on many different roles and different forms. It can be physical, it can be sexual, emotional, economic, it can be cultural, spiritual.
So physical abuse is, a lot of people think that it is just hitting, and so there is an idea that if you've just been pushed or spat on, you can't claim that that's physical abuse because you haven't actually been punched or you don't have physical injuries. But physical abuse is any form of that use of power and control where one person actually uses physical touch to cause harm or to dominate.
So it could be pinching, biting, kicking, punching, slapping, pushing, the use of an implement against someone.
Sexual abuse occurs when there is no consent given for a sexual act.
So it doesn't have to be actual intercourse for it to be sexual abuse. It can be a touch, it can be watching something that they don't want to watch, doing an act that they don't want to do. It could be using their mouth, using their fingers, using another instrument to use in a sexual act.
So within a domestic violence relationship, sexual assault occurs when he initiates some sort of sexual contact with his partner. She may or may not say yes. If she says yes and it's because she's fearful of the repercussions, then that's not consent.
Emotional abuse is that abuse that occurs when we are told something in a way that makes us feel negative towards ourselves. It actually is where our self-worth and self-esteem are actually diminished, and as a result we start to lose a little bit of who we are.
Emotional abuse covers things like gaslighting, so trying to make you feel like you're going a little bit mad, hiding things, changing things, undermining what you believe to be occurring or have been said, It also includes things like you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you're hopeless at this, you're useless at that. It's constantly changing the goalposts so that there's never an actual achieving what they say they want you to do.
The use of the emotion, so whether that's fear, guilt, shame, using that to manipulate somebody into doing something they don't want to do.
Economic abuse occurs when we're in a relationship and we have no control or limited control over our finances. This can happen really gradually over time. So sometimes it can be something very minor where we have to, all our money goes into our partner's bank account, where we're given an allowance, but we think that might be okay, but actually we're not actually able to access anything without asking for permission.
It's controlling the finances and also controlling decision making around finances, and having that power imbalance in the home where one person has decision-making authority and the power over the money.
You don't have access to money. You may have your own money but are forced to pay all the bills with that money. He may give you an allowance. He may need receipts and accounts of where you've spent money, limiting your access to money that you can use to leave. Denying access to ceremonies, land and family. Preventing religious observances. Forcing victims to do things against their own cultural beliefs. Denigration of cultural background. Using religious teachings or cultural traditions as a reason for violence. Domestic violence occurs across society, including people from the LGBTQ+ community, and that can be a range of different strategies and tactics, again to use power and control over someone else. It may be restricting medications, it may be telling someone that they're not masculine enough or not feminine enough. It may be denying access to medications. It could be outing their health status. That may mean something like their HIV status. It may be insisting that you have medical surgery to make you more masculine or more feminine as a way of, again, perpetuating that violence. It's about having one person who wants to use the other person to meet their needs. And they use power and control as a way of doing that.
Power and control is the inequality in a relationship. Power and control is where one person feels that they are dominant over the other and they have a right to tell that person how to live and what to do and how to behave in a relationship. Power and control happens when someone's self-worth and self-esteem have been eroded as a result of domestic violence.
It's monitoring that person, being able to see what they're doing, access to using stuff that they have done online or on their phone as a way of blackmailing somebody to do something they don't want to do. It could be following their every move through the tracker that we take for granted every day.
Sending text messages. It could be sending graphic or pornographic images. It could be using a phone to threaten, harass, stalk, intimidate.
Technology can be used as a way to stalk somebody. So post-breakup or even years after the relationship has ended, we know that people are still using technology, things like social media accounts, to gain access to a person, to seek their whereabouts and keep tabs on them. And so it can be a really scary form of cyber stalking.
Intimidation is about the threat of something bad happening to that person. What we've identified is that men who use violence against women will intimidate women so that they don't feel like they can reach out and ask for help, including asking for help from the police.
Intimidation can be used as a form of standing over somebody and manipulating the situation so that a person feels that they have no choice but to do the act that is being asked of them. So that intimidation could be a physical intimidation of signs. It could also be emotional intimidation. It can be a space where that person is feeling that they aren't in a space that's safe enough to say no.
Intimidation is used a lot when it comes to domestic violence. It's not just intimidation in the physical form, it's also in the emotional form and the financial form as well. It's where intimidation is used to ensure that that person's self-esteem and self-worth is remaining low, that they don't feel that they can make those choices and decisions on their own without having to second guess what they're doing. So that intimidation continually holds them under that umbrella of power and control.
One of the key perpetrator tactics is to isolate their victim survivor. And it's so isolating them from friends and family, isolating them from social groups, even isolating them from being able to work. There can also be elements of isolating them from faith-based or social groups. And it's about making that person solely dependent on the perpetrator of violence.
To exclude, to isolate somebody is reducing their knowledge. So, and without knowledge, we move into that powerless phase.
Isolation is both emotional and geographic. That may be moving around. It's about breaking the bonds around that victim. So if they don't have family, friends, neighbours, community members around them, they are essentially isolated.
So exclusion is about the isolating of the individual. The more that someone can actually be isolated, it means that they lose connection with the people around them and their community and their networks. When someone is isolated and excluded, they feel alone. When they're alone, they start to believe that that one person in their life is telling them the absolute truth. So all that negativity and all that negative chatter becomes their world, and isolation becomes and creates this loneliness, self-depression and anxiety where they become reliant on that person.
Certainly in most domestic violence relationships, we do see elements of minimising and denying. Where the person who uses violence tries to, again, it's the use of their control, to downplay their acts of violence, to downplay what they are doing. And it is a form of gaslighting where they are trying to convince the person that they're controlling that it's actually all in their head, that it's not happening.
Denying, of course, is that way of hiding the abuse that's taking place. Men will deny as a way of manipulating the truth. Blaming happens in situations like, I'm really sorry, but why did you push my buttons? Why did you do that? Why are you retaliating? I'm just responding to you because you're crazy, whatever the script is. It's a way of shifted that blame away from the perpetrator onto the victim.
In domestic violence, the minimising of the behaviours is really, really common. People put that, oh, no, that wouldn't have happened, or they try and diminish what the experience has been for the person involved. We seem to think that it's okay to create these reasons why domestic violence occurs. Oh, they were having a drink, they were drunk. Oh, there's money stresses. Oh, it was just a really hard day for that person. When in fact, that is actually all the reasons why it's not acceptable for domestic violence to occur.
Threats in a violent relationship can be varying. So it can be threats to withhold children or withhold access to money. It can be threats to harm pets or damage property. It can also be threats to harm themselves, so threatening self-harm, even threatening suicide, to maintain that level of power and control.
Threats are very commonly used in domestic violence. Threats can take on many different forms. It can be threats to a person's safety, it can be threats to their family, pets, children, their housing, their financial situation. There is a variety of threats that can be undertaken, and they're done as a way to ensuring that that person doesn't leave.
Sexual coercion is about manipulating someone to perform within a sexual relationship things that they may not necessarily want to be a part of. That can include things like photographs, multiple partners, or deviant behaviour. Sexual coercion includes pregnancy coercion. So there's a great deal of research around pregnancy coercion recently, and what they've identified is that men who use violence use pregnancy as a way of gaining and maintaining power and control over someone.
Sexual coercion can be seen as quite subtle, and it could be, oh, come on, let's just. So it's starting to push that boundary of what somebody's feeling uncomfortable around, but making it look like it will be okay. Harassment is the comments and the constant badgering around somebody with how they look, what they're saying, how they're dressing, what their actions might be. So it's that constant intimidation space.
Domestic violence is considered a male gender issue because if we look at the statistics, it shows that 95% of the perpetrators of domestic violence are actually men. Whether that's men on women or men on men, they are actually the main perpetrators when it comes to domestic violence.
Whilst we acknowledge that anybody can be a victim of domestic violence, overwhelmingly women are overrepresented. We also know that the majority of perpetrators of violence are men.
Domestic violence, according to the statistics, is predominantly male-led violence against women. This doesn't deny that it certainly occurs with female violence against male, but it can also include family members, different generations, so it can be really complex in that way.
The safety plan is an idea around how we're going to stay safe. It doesn't mean that we have to get out. It means how we're going to stay safe in that situation. And by having that plan, we've got an idea of what we can do if something was to occur. So it could be, well, where can I keep the keys? Where can I access the safest point in the house? How can I access the safest point in the house? Who would I need to contact if I needed support? Those kinds of ideas and plans around what can I do if.
A safety plan can be something really simple, like I know that when he comes home from the pub, I need to look after myself. He's likely to be argumentative. I think I'll, stay at mum's place. I'll go to my bedroom, close the door. He should leave me alone. So it can be something really simple like that. It may also include far more complex issues around safety, like how do I plan to leave and when is a safe time to leave. So certainly working within that sphere, it may be coming up with an escape bag and what to put in the escape bag, where to go, how to get there, what resources will be required, and how are you or the woman and her children going to remain safe.
A safety plan is really important to maintain safety and to ensure that you are actually making the right decisions that is for you.
To have a safety plan is important because we have an idea of what we can do. What we know when we're in a traumatic space is that we go straight into that fight, flight, freeze mode. If we have a plan already in place, we can access that plan while we're in that state of, whether it's a shock, robotic space that we go into. So we have an idea of what we can do and we don't feel frozen.
Certainly domestic violence can and does happen to men. We know that anybody can make the choice to use power and control over another person. So we know that domestic violence occurs in same-sex relationships. It can also occur in instances such as elder abuse. But overwhelmingly, women are the victims of domestic violence and men are the perpetrators. So we know that the main cause of domestic violence is gender inequality. But then underneath that is a series of drivers of violence, and these are society's idea that men hold decision-making authority and information. It's also the condoning of violence against women. So it's not just not speaking out when you see something, but it's also the condoning of violence against women in things such as video games and in movies. It's also society's strict adherence to rigid gender roles of masculinity and femininity, and a level of disrespect towards women. So certainly some of the things that we can all start doing is challenging the rigid gender stereotypes, especially around masculinity, what our understanding is of masculinity. It's about challenging behaviours when you see them, calling out disrespect towards women, calling out attitudes or behaviours that are condoning violence towards women.
Women who have experienced domestic violence can actually access a range of services to them. Locally, there are services like ourselves, Wagga Women's Health Centre. There is also accessing your local GP. There is also accessing the police, or it could just be as simple as talking to a safe friend, someone that you know that you can talk to and start to bounce some ideas around. And then there are other services available to you from there.
It could be something as simple as talking to a work colleague about what you might do to stay safe, and be opening up to someone that you trust. National services include Rape and Domestic Violence Service Australia. That's a 24-hour counselling, telephone counselling service, and anyone can access that. It could be something like the DV line, again, 24-hour. They also provide case management, so great service. For homelessness issues, Link to Home is usually the first course of action.
So a report came out in 2017, and at that time Wagga was amongst the top 25% of domestic violence in New South Wales.
8 in 10 DV victims are female, and 9 in 10 offenders are male.
In 2016, 397 reported incidents of domestic violence. 150 cars were stolen. What did we hear more about? Wagga residents are less likely to intervene or report DV than the Australian average.
1 in 25 people believe that domestic violence is okay in certain circumstances. If that person tries to end the relationship, if that person puts them down in public, if that person cheats on them, or if that person tries to gain access to the children, money or property.
Education affects our understanding of domestic violence and whether we justify it. Less than half know that domestic violence is about power and control. A third think that it's due to poor anger management.
And 97% of people know that DV is a crime, but 1 in 12 people don't think that rape can happen in a relationship. 1 in 4 men believe that men should be the dominant person within a relationship.
People who believe men are better leaders than women. Women belong in the home. Men are the head of the household and are in charge of the relationship, are more likely to commit domestic violence.
Many do not recognise the emotional, psychological, sexual and financial forms of domestic violence. Men are 6 times more likely to think women make up claims for DV during custody battles. Most people will know why women stay in a violent relationship, and this could be due to shame, having no support, keeping the family together, or the fear of violence. Within that though, there are 1 in 7 people who don't know why people stay. And then there are 20% of men who have absolutely no idea of why women stay within their violent relationships. 2 out of 3 know where to get help for DV.
Wagga is currently unprepared to address domestic violence. DV is not a priority for our leaders.